At dawn on August 28, 2025, in Temryak Bay on the Sea of Azov, a rare military event occurred. The Russian Black Sea Fleet's warship Bayan-M, worth nearly $8 billion, was attacked just as it was preparing to launch a salvo of Kalibr cruise missiles. This incident drew attention not only for its scale and the extent of the damage, but also because it showed a change in methods of warfare, where small, inexpensive means can still pierce dense defensive systems. This development has raised many questions about the balance of power on the Sea of Azov, and here is the full detailed report. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. At 3 a.m. on August 28, 2025, a rare upheaval shook the balance of power on the Sea of Azov. In Temryak Bay, a coastal area that Moscow has long considered impregnable, the Bayan-M warship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, worth nearly $8 billion, had just returned from a strategic combat mission. The ship was moored at the pier, conducting logistical resupply, refueling, restarting its entire cooling systems, and in particular preparing to launch a salvo of 8 Kalibr-NK cruise missiles, each costing more than $100 million with a range exceeding 950 kilometers, capable of reaching any key city in Ukraine. On deck, a group of naval officials gathered to celebrate the latest achievement, while the combat crew was allowed to rest, many having dozed off right at their control stations. None of them realized that within minutes they would become helpless witnesses to one of the boldest and most unexpected strikes of the entire war. At a distance of more than 6 kilometers offshore, a small speedboat was quietly skimming over the water, heading toward the harbor. Outwardly, it looked no different from an ordinary civilian boat, but inside the cabin, 2 Ukrainian soldiers from the 73rd Naval Center were disguised in Russian-style swimwear. Behind them, where velvet cages for marine animals should have been stored, were actually 2 heavy reconnaissance attack UAVs, upgraded FPV types with night vision cameras, inertial sensors, an internal navigation system that does not require GPS, and even 8-inch armored rifles. In less than 5 minutes, that boat would initiate an operation to break the Russian defensive system right at what is considered the floating fortress of Temryak. According to military experts, although the Bayan-M is only a small class of warship designed for inland waters like the Caspian or the Azov, it is a dangerous offensive platform, sufficiently maneuverable, and with enough firepower to threaten Kiev, Lviv, or Odessa whenever it leaves port. Each time the ship sorting meant another cycle of unease for Ukraine, because the next target of the Kalibr-NK could be a power station, a fuel depot, or even a school. Therefore, Kiev decided not to wait, but to strike first. To open the way, Ukraine had to calculate precisely how to penetrate the defensive network surrounding Temryak. This port is unlike any commercial seaport. It is a fortified ring. Pantsir SS-1 air defense complex is densely deployed, 2 Palit K-1 laser radar stations operating continuously around the clock. Any anomalous signal can be locked onto and destroyed within seconds. To the Russian military, Temryak is regarded as an inviolable watchtower where no UAV can slip through, but in reality that very absolute confidence became a fatal mistake. In the boat's cockpit, 2 Ukrainian soldiers hurriedly removed the gray camouflage tarp and pulled out 2 large UAVs. Each was over 1 meter long with a 1.7 meter wingspan, a fuselage made of lightweight fiberglass composite, matte gray to match the color of the nighttime sea, nearly invisible to radar. After a final check, they pulled the safety pins, activated the guidance module, then pressed the launch lever. The 2 UAVs left the boat in a dual attack pattern, 2 approach vectors, 2 independent targets, but absolutely synchronized in time and tactics. The first, codenamed Hrom, meaning thunder, was programmed to fly straight into the Bayan-M's surveillance radar mast to blind the opponent's entire electronic sensor system. The second, codenamed Vidplot, Retribution, controlled by HUR forces, flew on a trajectory offset by 30 degrees, its target the Kalibr missile launcher amidships, which housed all 8 cruise missiles. If Hrom succeeded, Vidplata would have the chance to punch straight into Bayan-M's vital center, striking its weapons system and fire control command. At exactly 3:29:12, Hrom was launched off the rail, skimming just above the water, its high-speed electric propeller screaming, and within 3 seconds, it had stabilized its course. Vidplata followed 40 seconds later, keeping a distance of 200 feet, flying low at only about 7 feet above the water, just enough to slip out of the radar sweep and the Pantsir S's lock-on angle. From that moment, the speedboat's mission was essentially complete. The battle now lay entirely in the hands of the 2 UAVs bearing fateful names. At a control bunker near Zaporizhia, the UAV operator watched the monochrome FPV screen intently. On it, the Bayan-M's radar tower gradually came into view, as clear as a training target. He held his breath, hands gripping the control stick. The distance closed rapidly, 950 feet, then 800, 650. The Russian radar kept turning steadily, showing no sign of recognizing the threat rushing in. A countdown sounded in the operator's ears. 5 seconds, 4, 3, and then a flash of light. At 3:31:25, Prom slammed straight into the radar mast. The explosion blazed bright. A plume of white smoke cut across the deck. Flames burst out on both sides, and debris sprayed into the sea. In less than a second, the Bayan-M's entire surveillance system was paralyzed. Antennas torn from their shafts, the transmitter short-circuited, sensors scorched, the central processor disabled. From a long-range strike machine, the Bayan-M turned into a tactically blind ship. The commander immediately shouted the order to activate the Pantsir-S defense system, the last hope of protecting the ship. But the control center had been destroyed, the cabin temperature spiked, the composite of the command tower was torn, and sea wind swept soot inside. A radar officer was seriously wounded, a fragment piercing his chest. The crew fell into chaos, command capability disrupted. And at that very moment, the second danger was rushing in. At exactly 3:31, just 6 seconds after Hrom blinded the main radar, a small gray dot came hurtling in from the port side of the Bayan-M at nearly 95 miles per hour. It was Vidplata, the second FPV UAV codenamed Retribution, the one tasked with delivering the coup de grace. In the auxiliary control room, a duty officer shouted a warning of a low-altitude object approaching from the port side, but it was too late. The radar was dead, the optical cameras were blinded by smoke, and the Pantsir system had not yet received the order to open fire. The multi-billion-dollar Russian ship now lay completely exposed before the attacking spear point. FPV imagery from Vidplata showed clearly a series of greenish-gray rectangular hatches along the mid-deck. Those were the 3 S-14 vertical launch compartments, housing all 8 Kalibr-NK missiles. The infrared camera marked a heat signal from compartment number 3, where one missile had switched to pre-launch status. That was the fatal weak point. As programmed, Vidplata immediately banked and dove at a 25-degree approach angle relative to the ship's longitudinal axis. Exactly at 3:32, the second UAV pierced straight into compartment number 3. The explosion erupted, the launch hatch was blown off, and a column of thick black smoke curled tens of meters into the air. The mid-deck was torn open, steel plates buckled, and metal fragments sprayed across the sea like shrapnel. The ship's automatic firefighting system engaged at once, CO2 gas valves spraying in bursts to smother the flames, but this response was purely desperate. The fire had already spread rapidly into the auxiliary electrical compartment, incinerating the launch control module. 2 adjacent compartments began to overheat, and the risk of a chain explosion loomed. On deck, the crew tried to seal the emergency valves. But the ship had already listed from 3 to 5 degrees to the right, a sign that the engineering compartment was flooded or that internal balance had been lost. The internal military communication system immediately transmitted a distress signal. Bayan-M, B-38 under attack, radar down, Kalibr system down, requesting urgent assistance to tow back to Temryak. In less than 7 minutes since the first UAV left the boat, Russia's modern warship had completely lost combat capability and was forced to withdraw from the battlefield. According to military observers, the importance of the Bayan-M far exceeds its material value. It has long been Russia's main offensive platform in the Sea of Azov, a shallow, narrow, semi-enclosed body of water where only compact ships operate effectively. With its ability to launch long-range cruise missiles, the Bayan-M had been considered a tool for exerting strategic pressure on Ukraine's cities and critical infrastructure. Yet with just 2 UAVs costing under $2,000 each, Kiev eliminated a strategic piece from the board. A few hours later, the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence Directorate released the video recorded by the UAV, the scene of the radar mast exploding, the mast collapsing, and a few seconds later, a second explosion tearing open the mid-deck, the ship listing clearly with no air defense response whatsoever. Naval News, the Kiev Post, Business Insider, and the Kiev Independent all verified the footage. According to independent naval experts, this is irrefutable evidence that Russia's defense system suffered a comprehensive failure in the face of an asymmetric tactic. The strategic consequences appeared immediately. The Bayan-M was forced to return to Sevastopol for repairs, a process that could take weeks or even longer if the digital infrastructure was severely damaged. For Ukraine, this victory is not only a material blow, but also carries psychological and political meaning. At a cost of less than 1% of the target, they proved that the Russian Navy has nowhere truly safe, even in the area Moscow still calls a quiet rear. Western analysts assess that the 2 FPV UAVs pierced through layer upon layer of defenses worth millions of dollars, striking precisely at 2 fatal weak points, the radar and the launch system. That shows these were not reckless raids, but operations carefully prepared, thoroughly rehearsed, and synchronized in time and tactics. Small, inexpensive weapons, when used intelligently and in coordination, have become a strategic nightmare for the Russian Navy in the 21st century. And this is not the first time Kiev has delivered such a shock. At the end of 2024, improvised UAVs forced a Sergei Kotov-class patrol ship to anchor for repairs. In the same year, a Caesar Kunikov-class landing ship was completely sunk in an amphibious UAV operation. More recently, in July 2025, for the first time, an FPV UAV launched from the sea successfully attacked an oil rig near Crimea, used by Russia as a radar station. That chain of events shows a trend. These are no longer isolated strikes, but a transformation of modern asymmetric warfare. From now on, any Russian ship operating in the Azov region, from bayonet, Cerna to logistics vessels, will have to live with a constant threat. UAVs costing less than $2,000, yet capable of disabling a billion-dollar warship. A cold but clear message has sounded from Temryak. The balance of power at sea may change, not thanks to aircraft carriers or destroyers, but thanks to tiny propellers with cameras and explosives skimming the water's surface in the dark. The strategic consequences of the attack lie not only in the material damage, but also in psychological warfare. The Black Sea Fleet, once a symbol of Russian power on the southern front, now has to face the reality that all activities are within the crosshairs. For officers, sailors, and the command, constant fear will reduce combat effectiveness. And more importantly, it sends a message. There is no absolutely safe place in a modern war where the line between high technology and non-traditional ingenuity is increasingly blurred. The ultimate consequence is a shift in the balance of power. If previously Russia controlled the seas thanks to its advantage in warships and cruise missiles, now Ukraine has shown it can break that monopoly with means that seem rudimentary. This development shows that in 21st century warfare, small UAVs can become decisive weapons, forcing military powers to change their entire defensive and offensive strategies. The message has become clear. The Sea of Azov is no longer Russia's absolutely safe zone. And from here on, every Russian ship leaving port will have to face the invisible specter named UAV, silent, inexpensive attackers, yet capable of changing the course of a war.